Hi there, I'm Corey Burns. I'm a technical project manager and consultant. Let's talk about three common Microsoft 365 design patterns. Now, these are going to be designs that use existing Microsoft 365 products to solve common business needs. These are ones that I use a lot, and I wanted to share them with you. First one is manual data collection. Maybe you're working through a process and someone's logging results. Maybe they're logging their sales at the end of the day or particular findings when investigating and servicing units. This kind of situation abounds. You can build a very simple workflow to collect this data and have comprehensive reporting at the end. So let's see how we start. We'll start with a Microsoft web form. You've probably worked with Microsoft Forms in the past. If you're working in Microsoft 365, a lot of options for collecting data. Then add a Power Automate flow, which takes the results from the form and writes them to a SharePoint list. SharePoint lists, if you haven't worked with them, work very similar to Excel with some additional features that make sense in the online space, including the people column, which can pull in individual profiles and associated data. I'm a big fan of that one. From your SharePoint list, you can feed into a Power BI report. And now you have an entire workflow using existing Microsoft 365 connections and products to comprehensively collect data manually. Now, you may ask yourself, hey, why are you using SharePoint List? SharePoint List isn't a server. Well, it's true. I like to start with SharePoint Lists because of the flexibility and how easy it is to add additional columns or change the kind of data you might be collecting. But with this particular flow, it's very flexible in what that data source is. You could, for instance, replace it with a Dataverse table, or even write directly to a Power BI semantic model once you've established it and have space for all of the data points you're going to collect. But SharePoint lists are a lot easier and friendlier for new people who might be new to automation or integrating technology, which is why I recommend it as a first step. Let's talk about design number two, the service queue. This is something everybody has seen in a lot of businesses. There's a queue of work or of tickets, and then people claim them or they're assigned and then they're worked. Similar to the other, we'll start off with a Microsoft web form and a Power Automate flow that is triggered by that web form. It'll write a row to the SharePoint list once it's submitted. And then we get to use Microsoft Power Apps for our service queue app. That's the Power App is the place where the service queue workers can claim tickets or claim work files that have been assigned to them, note resolutions, pass information back and forth, and is the general workhorse of this flow. From that same SharePoint list, because it's a central data point, we can build a report off of Power BI as well. So you can get both current status of things and larger trending data once you have a sufficient pool of data to find trends from. Now, you might look at this flow and say, hey, this seems pretty static from the beginning. What about the status of the work that gets submitted? How do the people find out more information about that? Well, one way that you can tweak this model is put a Power App on both sides. So you put the service request form inside a Power application, and you can also have it show related tickets that are currently being worked. The nice thing about Power Apps is that it has no limit for the amount of times that it can ping a data source, meaning you can set it to automatically refresh its data as often as every 5 seconds, sometimes even more often if it was appropriate. This makes it a really great use case for monitoring tickets, monitoring live work, submitting things and working together in real time, even enabling some basic kind of messaging or chat features. You also can feed this list using Power Automate from services outside of a form or a Power App. Say you want to be able to take tickets by email or maybe text message, or when other certain conditions are met, like price reaches a certain threshold. You can use Power Automate to monitor and evaluate these outside sources and then translate it into records in your SharePoint list. Lots of applications and ways to adjust this particular model that has a lot of use cases in a lot of different industries. Let's talk about the third and final design. I like to call it the one-stop shop. For this model, we're going to build a comprehensive Power App, meaning we're combining a lot of different functionalities and intents in one application. Power Apps can certainly handle it, as you can split functionality into multiple screens and layer several different elements on top of each other and using conditional logic. We'll use our SharePoint list as the place where our data lives. Report can feed into that SharePoint. The Power BI report can read the SharePoint list and also interact back with that data point using some Power Automate flows. We also can trigger some external and internal actions using Power Automate, both from the application, from the report, and triggered by the data living in the SharePoint list itself. The sky's pretty much the limit with this kind of model. You can make it as complicated and as powerful as you want, but this is really the connections that you're going to use to build it. That's only half the model. The other thing you have to ask yourself is how will you present these different pieces together to the user? What I like to do is I like to start with a SharePoint page. If your company doesn't use SharePoint, you could recreate these same kind of designs using an outside website source. All of these different elements behave very nicely if you embed them or you're going to run them inside of an iframe. They will allow some cross-origin loading if you are in that kind of situation. But I like SharePoint. It makes it very easy to throw these things onto a page and choose some configurations. So for instance, we can take our report from our data, take it up 2/3 of the screen, and then take our Power App and set it in the remaining third of a screen. Great when we want to have the user evaluate some of the trends and then make some decisions on actions in the Power application. Another thing we can do is adjust this into more of a dashboard style. Set the Power BI report or reports into a bar that runs along the top. A great way to show individual dials or metrics or slight trending numbers. And then it gives you more play space to interact with the Power App on the bottom, especially when you're evaluating longer form content or maybe completing some multi-step actions. You can reverse the design as well, splitting up some of the Power BI reporting into some smaller blocks while still giving some sizable space for the Power App. You have a lot of options and flexibility in SharePoint with the way it will let you play with columns, sections, and rows, so feel free to play with it. One that I particularly use a lot is putting things inside an accordion style sections. So they'll be collapsed by default, but you can expand the one that you need to access the particular functionality in question while keeping your screen not as busy for the rest. I'm Corey Burns. Good luck with your projects.